I was drinking my morning coffee when I heard the crash that would spiral my life into 6 months of absolute insanity. The sound was unmistakable: metal crunching, wood splintering, and the revving of an engine struggling against something solid. I rushed to my front window, still in my pajama pants and old college sweatshirt, and watched as a white Mercedes SUV backed away from what used to be my perfectly intact mailbox. The vehicle's front bumper was hanging at an odd angle, and my mailbox was completely destroyed, lying in 3 separate pieces across my snow-covered lawn. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Patricia Montgomery, the president of our Willow Creek HOA in suburban Denver, Colorado. Even from my window, I could see her scanning the neighborhood with that characteristic look she always had, the one that said she was already calculating how to make this someone else's problem. She was wearing a cream-colored puffer jacket that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and her highlighted blonde hair was pulled back in that tight ponytail she seemed to favor during HOA meetings. I grabbed my winter coat and headed outside, my boots crunching through the fresh snow that had fallen overnight. The January cold hit my face like a slap, but I was more focused on the destruction in my front yard. Patricia was already on her phone when I approached, not even looking at the damage she had caused. "Patricia, what happened?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. My name is Vincent Waters, and I had been living in this neighborhood for exactly 3 years. In those 3 years, I had learned that Patricia Montgomery was not someone who handled responsibility well, especially when it came to admitting fault. She held up one finger at me, continuing her phone conversation. I stood there in the cold for a good 2 minutes while she talked to whoever was on the other end. Finally, she ended the call and turned to me with a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. "Vincent, I was just about to come talk to you. As you can see, there has been an unfortunate incident with your mailbox. The snow made the roads quite treacherous, and your mailbox placement is really quite dangerous. It is far too close to the street." I blinked at her, genuinely confused by what I was hearing. "Patricia, you hit my mailbox. It is in the exact same spot it has been for the past 3 years. The exact same spot as every other mailbox on this street." She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures of her damaged bumper, which was definitely worse off than my mailbox had been. The entire front section was crumpled, and one of her fog lights was dangling by its wiring. "I will need your insurance information. Your negligently placed mailbox has caused significant damage to my vehicle. I estimate the repairs will cost at least $3,000. "Are you serious right now?" The words came out before I could stop them. "You drove into my property and destroyed my mailbox, and you want me to pay for your car?" Patricia straightened her spine, pulling herself up to her full height of maybe 5'4". "As HOA president, I am quite familiar with the covenant rules. Section 12, subsection 4 clearly states that all mailboxes must be placed at least 18 inches from the curb. I have reason to believe yours violates this regulation, which makes you liable for any accidents that occur as a result." I looked at my mailbox, or what was left of it. The post was snapped clean in half. The box itself was crumpled beyond recognition, and pieces of wood were scattered across my lawn. "Patricia, even if that were true, which I seriously doubt, you still hit my mailbox. You are responsible for the damage you caused. I will be filing a claim with my insurance company, and they will be contacting you. I expect full cooperation in this matter." She turned and walked back to her Mercedes, somehow managing to drive away even though her bumper was barely attached to her vehicle. I stood there in the cold, staring at the destruction, trying to process what had just happened. My neighbor from across the street, Tom Chen, walked over with his own cup of coffee, shaking his head. "Did I just see what I think I saw?" he asked. "Patricia hit my mailbox and then told me I have to pay for her car damage." Tom let out a low whistle. "That woman is something else. You know, she tried to fine me last month because my Christmas lights were up 2 days past the HOA deadline. 2 days. She literally drove around the neighborhood with a clipboard on December 27th, documenting every house that still had decorations up." "What did you do?" "Paid the fine. $50. It was not worth the fight." He took a sip of his coffee. "But this is different. She destroyed your property. You have got to fight this." I took pictures of everything. The scattered mailbox pieces, the tire tracks in the snow showing exactly how Patricia had veered off the road and directly into my mailbox. The distance from my mailbox post to the curb, which measured a solid 22 inches when I got my tape measure out. I documented everything from multiple angles. 2 days later, I received a letter in the mail. Not in my destroyed mailbox, obviously, but hand-delivered to my door by Patricia herself. She knocked exactly 3 times, waited precisely 10 seconds, then slid the envelope under my door. I watched through the peephole as she marched back to her car. The letter was typed on official HOA letterhead, complete with the Willow Creek logo and Patricia's name listed as president. I read it twice to make sure I was understanding it correctly. "Dear Mr. Waters, this letter serves as official notice that you are in violation of Willow Creek HOA Covenant Section 12, subsection 4, regarding improper mailbox placement. Your mailbox has been determined to be in violation of the required 18-inch setback from the curb. This violation resulted in significant damage to personal property on January 15, 2025. You are hereby required to pay damages in the amount of $3,200 for vehicle repairs, to be paid within 30 days of this notice. Additionally, you are required to remove all remaining mailbox debris from your property within 72 hours and install a new covenant-compliant mailbox within 14 days. Failure to comply will result in daily fines of $50 until the violation is corrected. The HOA board will be reviewing this matter at our next meeting on January 25th. You are welcome to attend and present your case. Sincerely, Patricia Montgomery, HOA President." I called my insurance company immediately. The representative I spoke with, a woman named Sarah who had probably dealt with hundreds of similar situations, listened patiently as I explained what happened. "So let me make sure I understand," she said. "This woman hit your mailbox, damaged her own car in the process, and is now claiming you are liable for her vehicle damage. That is exactly what is happening. And she is the president of your homeowners association." "Yes." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Waters, I am going to be honest with you. This is not how liability works. She was operating a vehicle. She hit a stationary object on your property. She is responsible for the damage she caused, both to her own vehicle and to your mailbox. Do you have documentation of the incident?" "I have photos of everything. The damage, the tire tracks, measurements showing my mailbox was properly placed according to HOA rules." "Good. Email those to me. In the meantime, do not admit any fault, do not agree to pay anything, and definitely do not sign anything she gives you. We will send someone out to assess the damage to your mailbox, and we will handle this through proper channels." I felt slightly better after that call, but the relief was short-lived. The next morning, I woke up to find an orange violation sticker plastered across my front door. It was dated that morning at 6 a.m., which meant Patricia had been at my house while I was sleeping, sticking HOA notices to my property. The sticker listed my address, and had a box checked next to failure to maintain property appearance with a handwritten note that read mailbox debris visible from street. Creates eyesore. Immediate removal required. I had been planning to clean up the mailbox pieces that weekend, but apparently 72 hours was not long enough for Patricia. I spent my Saturday morning picking up every piece of wood and metal from my lawn, loading it all into garbage bags. My neighbor Tom came over to help, bringing his son along. "This is ridiculous," Tom said, holding a garbage bag while I tossed in pieces of my destroyed mailbox. "She is the one who hid it, and you are out here cleaning up her mess." "I know, but I do not want to give her any more ammunition. The HOA meeting is in 4 days, and I want to make sure I have followed every rule to the letter." Tom's son, a teenager named Marcus, was recording the cleanup on his phone. "Dude, this is crazy. My mom is going to flip when she hears about this. She already hates the HOA here." "Why is he recording?" I asked Tom. "Evidence. He is learning about civil law in school, figured this might be educational." I spent the rest of the weekend researching HOA laws in Colorado. I learned that HOAs had significant power, but they were not above the law. They could enforce covenants and collect fines, but they could not violate state law or act in bad faith. I also learned that HOA boards were required to follow their own bylaws and could be held personally liable for actions taken outside their authority. The more I read, the more I realized that Patricia was overstepping her bounds. She could not unilaterally decide I was liable for her car damage. The HOA could enforce covenant violations, but even that required a proper hearing and vote by the board, not just a decision by the president alone. I printed out every relevant document I could find. The original HOA covenant, which I had received when I bought my house. The Colorado state laws regarding HOA governance. The bylaws for Willow Creek HOA. I highlighted the relevant sections and prepared a presentation for the upcoming board meeting. On the day of the meeting, I arrived at the community center 20 minutes early. The room was set up with a long table at the front for the board members and rows of chairs for residents. Patricia was already there, arranging papers and speaking in hushed tones with the other board members. There were 5 total. Patricia as president, a man named Donald Green as vice president, a woman named Susan Torres as secretary, and 2 at-large members named Robert Kim and Jennifer Walsh. Other residents started filing in. I was surprised to see how many people showed up. Apparently, word had spread about my situation, and people were curious to see how it would play out. Tom and his wife were there. Marcus was there with his phone still recording. I recognized several other neighbors I had waved to over the years, but never really talked to. Patricia called the meeting to order at exactly 7 p.m. She went through the standard opening procedures, reading the minutes from the last meeting, discussing ongoing maintenance issues in the neighborhood. Finally, she got to new business. Item 7 on our agenda tonight concerns a covenant violation at 4152 Maple Drive, the property owned by Mr. Vincent Waters. "Mr. Waters, would you like to come forward?" I walked to the front of the room, carrying my folder of documents. Patricia gestured to a single chair facing the board table, positioned so that I had my back to all the residents. It felt like being on trial. "Mr. Waters, you received notice of a violation regarding your mailbox placement. Would you like to address the board?" I took a deep breath. "Yes, I would. First, I want to clarify what actually happened. On January 15th, Patricia Montgomery was driving her vehicle and hit my mailbox, destroying it completely. Rather than accepting responsibility for the accident, she has claimed that my mailbox was improperly placed and that I am liable for the damage to her vehicle. I have several issues with this. Patricia interrupted. Mr. Waters, this hearing is about your covenant violation, not about the accident. The two are directly related, I said. You are claiming my mailbox violated the covenant as justification for holding me liable for your accident, so let us discuss the covenant. Section 12. Subsection 4 states that mailboxes must be placed at least 18 inches from the curb. I measured my mailbox placement. It was 22 inches from the curb. I have photographs with measurements clearly visible. I pulled out the photos and passed them to the board members. Patricia barely glanced at them. Those measurements could have been taken at any time, she said. After the accident, after you adjusted the remaining post. The mailbox post was snapped in half. I could not have adjusted anything. But even if you do not believe my measurements, every single mailbox on Maple Drive is placed at the same distance from the curb. They were all installed by the same contractor when the neighborhood was built. Are you claiming that every mailbox on the street is in violation? This seemed to give some of the other board members pause. Robert Kim spoke up. Patricia, do we have any documentation that his mailbox was measured before the accident? I measured it myself that morning before I contacted Mr. Waters, Patricia said smoothly. It was approximately 16 inches from the curb. You have photos of this measurement, I asked. I did not think to document it at the time. I was more concerned with the damage to my vehicle. But you did take photos of your vehicle damage, of course, for the insurance claim. Then you were thinking about documentation. You just chose not to document the mailbox placement. I pulled out another sheet of paper. I also want to point out that according to the HOA bylaws, specifically Article 5, Section 2, any fines or penalties must be approved by a majority vote of the board, not decided unilaterally by the president. Your letter to me demanded payment of $3,200 without any board vote. Patricia's expression tightened. That was not an HOA fine. That was a personal claim for damages caused by your negligence. So you are admitting this is not an HOA matter. Because your letter was on HOA letterhead, sent from your position as HOA president, citing HOA covenant violations. The other board members were looking uncomfortable now. Donald Green, the vice president, cleared his throat. Patricia, I think we need to discuss this. I was not aware you had sent a letter demanding payment for your vehicle damage. I sent Mr. Waters a notice of violation, which is within my authority as president. The vehicle damage is a separate matter that I am handling through my insurance. Then why did you mention it in the letter? I asked. And why did you state that my covenant violation resulted in damage to personal property and that I was required to pay for repairs? Patricia stood up, her face flushed. This is not a deposition, Mr. Waters. We are here to discuss your violation, not to put me on trial. Susan Torres, the secretary, spoke up. She had been taking notes throughout the exchange. Actually, Patricia, I think Mr. Waters raises valid concerns. I do not remember the board voting to fine him or to hold him liable for vehicle damage. And if his measurements are correct, then there was no covenant violation to begin with. I measured it myself, Patricia insisted. His mailbox was too close to the street, which is why the accident occurred in the first place. The roads were icy. I was driving at a safe speed and his mailbox jutted out into my path. How fast were you driving? Tom called out from the audience. Patricia whipped around. This is not an open forum. Residents need to remain quiet unless called upon. Actually, according to the bylaws, residents are allowed to speak during new business if recognized by any board member, Tom said. Article 3, Section 8. Donald Green nodded. He is correct. Tom, what is your question? I am just curious how fast Patricia was driving when she hit the mailbox. She says she was going a safe speed, but her vehicle sustained over $3,000 in damage from hitting a mailbox. That seems like she was going pretty fast. I was going the speed limit, Patricia said tersely. Which is 25 miles per hour in this neighborhood, Tom continued. But if you were really going that slow and the roads were icy, why did you not just slide past the mailbox? Why did you hit it head-on with enough force to destroy both the mailbox and your bumper? I had not thought about that, but Tom was right. The tire tracks in the snow showed that Patricia had not been sliding on ice. She had driven directly into my mailbox. I do not have to justify my driving to you, Patricia snapped. You do if you are trying to claim that someone else is liable for an accident you caused. Another resident spoke up. I did not know her name, but I had seen her at neighborhood events. The meeting was spiraling out of Patricia's control. Other residents started chiming in with their own complaints about HOA overreach, fines they thought were unfair, rules they felt were applied inconsistently. Patricia tried to gavel them into silence, but the room was in full revolt. Finally, Robert Kim stood up and raised his hands. Everyone, please, let us get back to the matter at hand. Patricia, I think we need to table this discussion. The board should meet privately to review the documentation and the bylaws before we make any decisions about violations or fines. I also think you need to recuse yourself from this vote, given that you are personally involved in the incident. Absolutely not, Patricia said. I am the president of this board, and I have a responsibility to enforce our covenants. You also have a conflict of interest, Jennifer Walsh added. She had been quiet throughout the meeting, but now she looked directly at Patricia. If Vincent is found to be at fault, it helps your insurance claim. You cannot be objective about this. I am perfectly objective. My only concern is maintaining the standards of our neighborhood. Then prove it, Donald said. Recuse yourself from the vote. Let the rest of us review the evidence and make a decision. Patricia gathered her papers with sharp, angry movements. Fine, but I expect this board to uphold the covenants we all agreed to when we bought our homes. If we start making exceptions, this entire neighborhood will go downhill. She stormed out of the community center, leaving the rest of the board members looking at each other awkwardly. Donald took over as acting chair and quickly wrapped up the meeting, stating that they would review everything and schedule a follow-up discussion within 2 weeks. I left the meeting feeling like I had won a small battle, but I knew the war was far from over. Patricia was not the type of person to back down easily, and I had essentially challenged her authority in front of the entire neighborhood. The next morning, I found another notice on my door. This one was for failure to install a replacement mailbox within the required 14-day period. Never mind that only 6 days had passed since the accident. Never mind that I was still dealing with insurance paperwork and trying to figure out what kind of mailbox I was even allowed to install according to HOA rules. I called Donald Green, the vice president. He answered on the third ring, sounding tired. Vincent, I figured I would be hearing from you. Let me guess, Patricia left you another notice. How did you know? Because she left 3 other residents' notices this morning too. People who spoke up at last night's meeting. She is on a rampage. Can she do that? Just fine people arbitrarily? Technically, no. But she has been doing it for years, and most people just pay the fines because it is easier than fighting. I have been on this board for 6 years, and I have watched Patricia become more and more aggressive with enforcement. Last night was the first time I have seen residents really push back. What happens now? The board is meeting tomorrow night without Patricia. We are going to review your case and also discuss some broader concerns about how the HOA has been operating. Can you send me all your documentation? Photos, measurements, the letter Patricia sent you, everything. I spent the rest of the day compiling everything into a single email. Photos of the accident scene, the tire tracks, the measurements, the letter from Patricia, the violation notices, my research on Colorado HOA laws. I sent it all to Donald and copied the other board members. 2 days passed without any word. I was starting to think that nothing would change, that Patricia would somehow convince the board to side with her when Donald called me. "Vincent, the board met last night. We voted 4-0, with Patricia abstaining because we required her to recuse herself. The vote was in your favor. There was no covenant violation. Your mailbox was properly placed. We are not fining you, and we are certainly not holding you liable for Patricia's vehicle damage." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. "Thank you. I appreciate you actually looking at the evidence. There is more. We also voted to have the HOA's insurance policy cover the cost of your new mailbox, since the accident occurred because Patricia was on HOA business at the time. She claims she was driving around the neighborhood to check for covenant violations that morning." Wait, so the HOA is accepting liability for the accident? Not exactly. We are just covering your mailbox replacement as a gesture of good faith. Patricia's vehicle damage is still her responsibility. But here is the thing, Vincent. She is not taking this well. I need to warn you that she is talking about suing you personally for the vehicle damage. On what grounds? She is claiming negligence. That even if your mailbox met HOA standards, it was still placed in a dangerous location and you should have known better. I felt my stomach drop. That is insane. It is a mailbox, in the same spot as every other mailbox on the street. I know, and I do not think she has a case. But I wanted you to be prepared. She is also making noise about trying to get you kicked out of the neighborhood. Can she do that? No. The HOA can foreclose on a property for unpaid fines, but you have not been fined anything now. She is just angry and lashing out. That weekend, I installed a new mailbox. I made sure it was exactly 22 inches from the curb, the same as the old one. I took photos of the installation process, documenting every step. I was not taking any chances. For a few weeks, things were quiet. I thought maybe Patricia had moved on, found some other resident to harass. Then I got served with papers. A process server showed up at my door on a Tuesday evening, handing me a manila envelope. Inside was a lawsuit filed in Denver County Court. Patricia Montgomery versus Vincent Waters. She was suing me for the full cost of her vehicle repairs, plus her insurance deductible, plus loss of use of her vehicle while it was being repaired, plus emotional distress. The total amount she was seeking was $12,000. I sat at my kitchen table, reading through the complaint. It was full of legal language, but the basic argument was that I had been negligent in maintaining my property, that my mailbox created a hazard, and that her accident was a direct result of my negligence. She had attached photos of her damaged vehicle, repair estimates, and a statement from her mechanic. What she did not include was any evidence that my mailbox was actually in a dangerous location. No photos of the mailbox placement before the accident. No testimony from accident reconstruction experts. No proof of anything except that she had hit my mailbox and damaged her car in the process. I called my insurance company again. Sarah, my representative, listened to the situation and then transferred me to their legal department. I ended up speaking with an attorney named Mark Sullivan who specialized in liability claims. "Mr. Waters, based on what you have told me, this is a pretty weak case. She was operating a vehicle. She hit a stationary object. The burden is on her to prove that the object was placed negligently and that your negligence caused the accident. From what you have described, she cannot prove either of those things. So what do I do? We are going to assign an attorney to represent you. The cost is covered under your homeowner's policy. Do not respond to her lawsuit on your own, do not contact her directly, and do not discuss the case with anyone except your attorney. Let us handle this. The attorney they assigned was a woman named Rebecca Sanchez. She called me the next day and set up a meeting at her office in downtown Denver. Her office was in one of those modern glass buildings with a view of the mountains, and her walls were covered with framed law degrees and certificates. Rebecca was maybe 40, with dark hair pulled back in a professional bun and sharp, intelligent eyes. She shook my hand firmly and gestured for me to sit. I have reviewed your file, Mr. Waters. I have also done some research on Patricia Montgomery. Did you know she has filed 3 other lawsuits against neighbors in your HOA over the past 5 years? I sat forward in my chair. No, I had no idea. 2 were for alleged property damage, similar to this case. 1 was for defamation after a neighbor spoke out against her at an HOA meeting. All 3 cases were either dismissed or settled for nuisance value. She has a pattern of using litigation as intimidation. So what do? We file a response denying her claims. Then we counterclaim for the cost of your mailbox, which she destroyed. We also explore whether we have grounds for a claim of malicious prosecution or abusive process, though those are difficult to prove. Mostly, we make it clear that you are not going to be bullied. Over the next few months, I learned more about the legal system than I ever wanted to know. There were filings and motions and discovery requests. Patricia's attorney demanded all kinds of documents from me, financial records, property maintenance records, even my personal emails. My attorney did the same to Patricia. Discovery was revealing. Through the legal process, we learned that Patricia had been driving 41 miles per hour in a 25-mile-per-hour zone at the time of the accident. This was documented in the accident report she had filed with her insurance company. She had lied about going the speed limit. We also learned that she had been texting while driving. Her phone records, which we subpoenaed, showed that she had sent a text message approximately 10 seconds before the accident. She had been distracted and speeding. Rebecca filed a motion to dismiss Patricia's case based on this evidence, arguing that Patricia's own negligence was the sole cause of the accident. The judge scheduled a hearing. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, nothing like the dramatic settings you see on TV. It was a simple room with wood paneling, a raised bench for the judge, and 2 tables for the attorneys. Patricia was there with her lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. I was there with Rebecca. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Carolyn Winters. She had a reputation for being no-nonsense and fair. She reviewed the motions in front of her and then looked up at Patricia's attorney. "Counselor, I have reviewed the evidence presented by the defense. Your client was speeding and texting at the time of the accident. How do you respond to the argument that her own negligence caused this accident?" Patricia's attorney stood up. "Your Honor, while it is true that Miss Montgomery was traveling above the posted speed limit, this does not absolve Mr. Waters of his duty to maintain his property in a safe manner. The mailbox created a hazard that contributed to the accident. Did it?" Judge Winters looked down at the photos in front of her. The mailbox was placed at the same distance from the curb as every other mailbox on the street. It was compliant with HOA regulations. It was a standard mailbox in a standard location. How did it create a hazard? The placement near the roadway, combined with snowy conditions, created a dangerous situation. A dangerous situation that your client would have avoided if she had been driving the speed limit and paying attention to the road instead of her phone. Judge Winters did not sound impressed. Motion to dismiss is granted. Miss Montgomery, your case is dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Waters, your counterclaim will proceed. We will schedule a hearing date for that matter. Patricia stood up, her face red. Your Honor, this is not fair. He should be responsible for the damage to my vehicle. Miss Montgomery, you were speeding and texting. You hit a stationary object. There is no legal theory under which Mr. Waters can be held liable for your actions. Your lawsuit was frivolous, and you are fortunate that I am not sanctioning you for bringing it. Sit down. Patricia sat, but I could see her hands clenched into fists on the table in front of her. The hearing for my counterclaim was scheduled for 6 weeks later. In the meantime, things in the neighborhood got weird. Patricia started showing up at my house unannounced, taking photos of my property from the sidewalk. She would just stand there with her phone, photographing my lawn, my house, my new mailbox. She never came onto my property, always stayed on the public sidewalk, but it was creepy and invasive. Other residents started telling me their own Patricia stories. Apparently, she had been terrorizing the neighborhood for years. The 2 lawsuits Rebecca had mentioned were just the tip of the iceberg. Patricia had filed hundreds of violation notices over the years, fining residents for things like grass being a 1/4 inch too long, paint colors being slightly off from approved shades, holiday decorations being up a single day too long. Tom told me about a resident named Gary who had lived 3 houses down from me. Gary had installed a new front door that was a slightly different shade of red than the HOA approved. Patricia had fined him $50 a day until he changed it. The door had cost Gary $2,000 to install. The fines had totaled over $3,000 by the time he gave up and replaced it with an approved color. Another resident, Maria, told me about being fined for parking her car in her own driveway. Patricia claimed the car was a commercial vehicle because it had a small company logo on the side. Maria was a real estate agent, and the logo was just her name and phone number. The fine was $100 a day. Maria ended up having to park 3 blocks away and walk to her own house every day for a month until she could get the logo removed. The stories went on and on. Patricia had created a climate of fear in the neighborhood where people were afraid to do anything that might attract her attention. The HOA board had let her operate unchecked for years because no one wanted to deal with her wrath, but something was changing. My case had emboldened other residents. They started showing up at HOA meetings in larger numbers, asking questions, challenging decisions. A group of residents even started a petition to recall Patricia from her position as HOA president. The recall petition needed signatures from 30% of homeowners in the development. There were 240 homes in Willow Creek, so they needed 72 signatures. They got 137. The recall election was scheduled for the same week as my counterclaim hearing. Patricia was fighting both battles simultaneously, and it was clearly taking a toll. I saw her at the grocery store one day, and she looked exhausted. Her usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled, and she had dark circles under her eyes. She saw me and quickly turned her cart in the other direction, avoiding me entirely. The counterclaim hearing was straightforward. Rebecca presented the evidence. Patricia had hit my mailbox, destroying it. The cost to replace it was $450. Patricia's insurance should have covered it, but she had refused to file a claim because she maintained that I was at fault. We were also asking for my attorney's fees and costs, though Rebecca warned me that those were unlikely to be awarded in a small case like this. Patricia's attorney barely put up a fight. He presented a half-hearted argument that the mailbox damage was part of the overall accident, and that without liability for the accident, There should be no liability for the mailbox. The judge disagreed. Miss Montgomery, you hit Mr. Waters' mailbox with your vehicle. You destroyed his property. You are responsible for paying to replace it. Judgment is entered in favor of Mr. Waters in the amount of $450. As for attorney's fees, I am going to make an exception in this case. Mr. Waters was forced to defend against a frivolous lawsuit and then pursue this counterclaim because you refused to take responsibility for your actions. I am awarding him 50% of his reasonable attorney's fees. The parties will submit fee applications within 14 days. When all was said and done, Patricia owed me just over $6,000. The mailbox replacement, half my attorney's fees and court costs. Rebecca assured me that we could garnish her wages or put a lien on her property if she did not pay, but I suspected it would be a fight to collect. The recall election happened 2 days later. The HOA bylaws required a simple majority vote to remove a board member. The results were overwhelming. 81% voted to remove Patricia as president. The vote to remove her from the board entirely was even higher, 87%. Patricia showed up at the community center when the results were announced. She stood at the back of the room, her arms crossed, as Donald read the vote tallies. When he finished, she walked to the front of the room. I have dedicated 6 years of my life to this HOA. 6 years of volunteering my time, my energy, my expertise. And this is how you repay me. By believing lies and voting me out because I dared to hold people accountable. Tom stood up. Patricia, no one is saying you did not work hard, but you took things too far. You used the HOA as a weapon against people. You fined us for tiny, meaningless violations. You sued Vincent because you could not admit you made a mistake. This is not about accountability. This is about you abusing your power. I never abused anything. I enforced the rules that we all agreed to. You enforced them selectively and excessively, Maria added. You let some people slide while hammering others. You used the HOA to pursue personal vendettas. Patricia looked around the room, and I saw something in her face that might have been genuine hurt. For just a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the 6 months of stress she had put me through, the money I had spent on attorneys, the hours of lost sleep worrying about lawsuits and fines. Fine, Patricia said quietly. I will clear out my files and turn everything over to Donald. But do not come crying to me when this neighborhood falls apart because no one wants to enforce standards anymore. She left, and the room erupted in conversation. The board scheduled an election for a new president, which Donald won by a landslide. One of the first things the new board did was review all the fines Patricia had issued over the past 2 years. They ended up rescinding about 60% of them, determining that they were either based on incorrect interpretations of the rules or were excessive responses to minor issues. I thought that was the end of it. Patricia was gone from the HOA, I had won my court case, and life could go back to normal. I was wrong 3 weeks after the recall election. I was leaving for work when I noticed something wrong with my car. All 4 tires were flat, not just low on air, completely flat. I called a tow truck and had my car taken to a mechanic. The mechanic called me an hour later. Mr. Waters, all 4 of your tires have been slashed. Someone took a knife to them. I filed a police report. The officer who responded was a young guy named Officer Davis who looked like he was fresh out of the academy. He took photos of the tires, asked if I had any enemies, and told me that without witnesses or security camera footage, there was not much they could do. Do you have any cameras on your house? He asked. No, I never thought I needed them. You might want to consider installing some. Cases like this, the perpetrator sometimes comes back. I took his advice. I had a security system installed that weekend, with cameras covering my driveway, front door, and backyard. The system recorded everything to the cloud, so even if someone destroyed the cameras, the footage would be saved. 2 days after the cameras were installed, they caught Patricia walking past my house at 2 in the morning. She did not do anything, just walked slowly past, looking up at my house. She did it again the next night and the night after that. I called Officer Davis and showed him the footage. He looked concerned. "That's weird behavior, but it's not illegal. She's on a public sidewalk. Has she contacted you or threatened you? Not since the court case ended. If she contacts you, if she comes onto your property, if she does anything threatening, call us immediately. In the meantime, keep documenting everything." The nighttime walks continued for a week. Then they stopped. I thought maybe Patricia had moved on, found something else to occupy her attention. Then my security cameras caught her again, this time at 4 in the morning, standing at the end of my driveway. She was just standing there, staring at my house. She stayed for almost 20 minutes before walking away. I called Officer Davis again. This time, he agreed to go talk to her. He came back and told me that Patricia had claimed she was just taking walks to clear her head, that she had insomnia and walking helped. She denied targeting me specifically. I told her that regardless of her intentions, her behavior is making you uncomfortable and she needs to walk a different route, Officer Davis said. If she shows up again, call us immediately. Patricia did not show up on my cameras again, but other things started happening. My mailbox, the new one I had carefully installed, was knocked over. Not destroyed like the first one, just pushed over so it was lying on its side. The post was not damaged, so someone had just shoved it hard enough to tip it over. A week later, I found garbage scattered across my lawn. Food wrappers, plastic bottles, all kinds of trash. It happened again 3 days later. Then someone spray painted a single word on my driveway: liar. I reported each incident to the police. They took reports, but without evidence of who was doing it, there was nothing they could do. My security cameras never caught anyone in the act, which meant whoever was doing this was being careful to stay out of view. The harassment escalated. Someone poured motor oil on my lawn, killing a large patch of grass. Someone scratched a long, deep gouge into the side of my car. Someone broke my front window with a rock in the middle of the night. After the broken window, the police started taking things more seriously. Officer Davis was replaced by Detective Lisa Martinez, who specialized in harassment cases. She came to my house and reviewed all the security footage, took copies of all the police reports I had filed, and asked detailed questions about my relationship with Patricia. "Mr. Waters, I am not supposed to tell you this, but I want you to be careful." I pulled up Miss Montgomery's record. She has had several incidents over the years. A restraining order filed against her by a former neighbor that was later dropped. A complaint from a coworker about stalking behavior that was investigated but never charged. A domestic disturbance call from her ex-husband. There is a pattern of behavior here. So what do I do? Keep documenting everything. Do not engage with her. If you see her, do not talk to her, do not approach her, just call us. I am going to go have a conversation with her, make it clear that we are watching. Detective Martinez visited Patricia, and for a few days, nothing happened. I started to hope that maybe the police warning had scared her off. Then I came home from work and found my front door wide open. I had definitely locked it that morning. I was certain of it. I called 911 and waited outside until the police arrived. Officers searched my house but found no one inside. Nothing appeared to be stolen, but someone had definitely been in my house. Things were moved slightly, drawers opened, papers shuffled. It felt like a violation in a way that none of the other incidents had. Detective Martinez came back out. "Did you check if anything was taken?" I walked through the house with her, checking my electronics, my valuables. Everything was there. I do not think anything is missing. It is like someone just wanted to mess with my stuff, or was looking for something. Looking for what? I have no idea. Detective Martinez examined my front door. There are no signs of forced entry. Either someone picked the lock, which is possible but requires skill, or they had a key. No one has a key except me. You have not given a key to anyone. A girlfriend, a friend who checks on your house when you are gone, a house cleaner. No, no one. We changed my locks that day, and I added a deadbolt. I also upgraded my security system to include interior cameras. If someone got into my house again, I would have video of them. The interior cameras paid off 2 weeks later. I was at work when my phone buzzed with a security alert. Someone was in my house. I pulled up the live camera feed and watched as Patricia Montgomery walked through my living room. She had a key in her hand. I called 911 and Detective Martinez simultaneously. "Patricia is in my house right now. I am watching her on my security cameras." "Stay where you are," Detective Martinez said. "Do not go home. We are sending units now." I watched on my phone as Patricia walked through my house, opening cabinets, looking through drawers. She spent a long time in my home office, rifling through my desk. Then she did something bizarre. She took out her phone and started taking photos of things in my house. My computer screen, papers on my desk, books on my shelves. Police arrived within 5 minutes. I watched as officers entered my house with guns drawn, finding Patricia in my office. She did not resist, just calmly let them handcuff her. I drove home to find Patricia sitting in the back of a police car, 3 patrol vehicles in my driveway, and Detective Martinez waiting to talk to me. "We have her," Detective Martinez said. "Breaking and entering, trespassing, burglary. We also found a key to your house in her pocket." "Do you know how she got it?" "I have no idea. I never gave her a key." Detective Martinez held up an evidence bag with a key inside. "This is not a copy made at a hardware store. This is an original key, same brand as your locks. Any idea how she would have gotten an original?" Then it hit me. When I bought the house 3 years ago, the HOA collected a copy of everyone's keys. For emergencies, they said. In case someone is out of town and there is a flood or a fire and they need to get into the house. Patricia was HOA president. She would have had access to all those keys. "Did you get that key back when she was removed from the board?" I did not even think about it. Detective Martinez shook her head. "She has been using HOA keys to enter residents' homes. This is bigger than just you. We need to check if she has keys to other houses." Patricia was arrested and charged with breaking and entering, criminal trespass, and stalking. At her arraignment, she pleaded not guilty. Her attorney argued that she was still HOA president when she collected the keys, and she believed she had authority to enter homes for HOA purposes. The judge did not buy it. "Miss Montgomery, you were removed from your position as HOA president weeks before this incident. Even if you were still president, which you were not, that would not give you the right to enter someone's home without permission. Bail is set at $20,000. Patricia's husband, a quiet man I had only seen a few times, posted her bail. She was released with a GPS monitor and strict orders to stay away from me and my property. The case took months to wind through the court system. In the meantime, the HOA conducted an audit of all the keys Patricia had collected over the years. They found keys to 47 homes. The board sent out a notice recommending that all residents change their locks. Tom came over one evening with a 6-pack of beer. We sat on my back porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "This whole thing is insane," he said. "I have lived here for 8 years, and I gave Patricia a key to my house. She could have been walking through my house any time she wanted. Did you change your locks first thing? Cost me $300, but it is worth it for peace of mind. A bunch of us are talking about suing her for invasion of privacy. I just want this to be over. I just want to live in my house without worrying about her showing up." I heard the prosecutor is offering her a plea deal. Probation and counseling if she pleads guilty. She will never plead guilty. She does not think she did anything wrong. Tom took a long drink of his beer. "You are probably right. She is going to take this to trial, is not she? Probably." The trial was scheduled for September, 9 months after Patricia had hit my mailbox. 9 months of stress, legal fees, police reports, and harassment. I was ready for it to be over. The prosecutor assigned to the case was a woman named Amanda Richardson who looked too young to be handling criminal cases, but she knew what she was doing. We met in her office a week before the trial. "Mr. Waters, I want to prepare you for what is going to happen in court. Miss Montgomery's attorney is going to try to make this about the HOA dispute. He is going to argue that she believed she had authority to enter your home as part of her HOA duties. We need to make this about what actually happened. She broke into your house without permission after she was no longer HOA president. What if the jury believes her? We have strong evidence. The security footage shows her entering your home. We have the timeline showing she was removed as HOA president weeks before the incident. We have the GPS data showing she had been walking past your house repeatedly in the middle of the night. We have the damage to your property, the slashed tires, all of it. She has no reasonable explanation for any of this. The trial lasted 3 days. Patricia's attorney tried to paint her as a dedicated HOA volunteer who was being persecuted for doing her job. He argued that the key situation was a misunderstanding, that Patricia genuinely believed she still had authority to enter homes for HOA purposes. The prosecutor methodically destroyed that argument. She showed the recall election results proving Patricia had been removed. She showed the police reports documenting Patricia's harassment. She played the security footage of Patricia walking through my house, clearly not there for any legitimate HOA purpose. The most damaging testimony came from another resident, Maria, who testified that she had caught Patricia in her house 2 weeks before my incident. Maria had come home early from work and found Patricia in her bedroom, photographing the inside of Maria's closet. Patricia had claimed she was checking for a water leak that had been reported. Maria testified that there was no water leak, and she had never given Patricia permission to enter. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They found Patricia guilty on all counts: breaking and entering, criminal trespass, and stalking. Sentencing was scheduled for a month later. In the meantime, Patricia was released, but her GPS monitor was kept in place. The restraining order preventing her from coming near me or my property remained in effect. At the sentencing hearing, the judge was clearly not sympathetic to Patricia's arguments. Patricia's attorney asked for probation, arguing that his client had no prior criminal record, and that this was all a misunderstanding stemming from her dedication to the HOA. The prosecutor asked for jail time, arguing that Patricia had engaged in a months-long campaign of harassment that had escalated to breaking into someone's home. She also pointed out the other incidents: the slashed tires, the property damage, the stalking behavior. The judge looked at Patricia sternly. "Miss Montgomery, I have reviewed all the evidence in this case. I have read the victim impact statements from Mr. Waters and other residents. What troubles me most is your complete lack of remorse. Even now, You seemed to believe that you were justified in your actions. You used your position as HOA president to terrorize your neighbors. You collected keys to their homes and used those keys to violate their privacy. When you were removed from that position, you escalated your behavior into criminal activity. This court takes these matters very seriously. Patricia was sentenced to 18 months in jail, followed by 3 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay restitution to me for the damaged property, the cost of changing my locks and my security system. The total came to just over $8,000. Patricia's husband filed for divorce 2 weeks later. The neighborhood gossip was that he had been trying to divorce her for years, but stayed because of their kids, who were now adults. The arrest and conviction gave him the final push he needed. Patricia served 14 months before being released on good behavior. By then, she and her husband had sold their house in Willow Creek, and she moved to an apartment across town. The restraining order was extended for another 5 years, so she was legally prohibited from coming anywhere near the neighborhood. Life slowly returned to normal. The new HOA board was much more reasonable. They updated the bylaws to include oversight provisions and term limits for board members. They also changed the policy on collecting house keys, making it voluntary and requiring keys to be stored in a secure lockbox that required 2 board members to access. Tom became the new HOA president the following year. At his first board meeting, he proposed a motion to officially apologize to all residents who had been unfairly fined during Patricia's tenure and to refund those fines where possible. The motion passed unanimously. I ran into Patricia's ex-husband at the grocery store about a year after everything ended. He looked happier, more relaxed than I had ever seen him. "Vincent, I owe you an apology," he said. "I knew Patricia was out of control. I saw what she was doing to the neighborhood to you. I should have said something, should have stopped her. I was just afraid of her, afraid of what she would do if I challenged her. It is not your fault. She made her own choices. Still, I am sorry you went through all that. I hope things are better now." They are much better, and they were. I could park in my driveway without worrying about violation notices. I could leave my Christmas lights up an extra day without fines. I could live in my house without fear of someone breaking in. My mailbox, the one I had carefully installed after Patricia destroyed the original, still stood at exactly 22 inches from the curb. Every time I checked my mail, I thought about the crazy chain of events that started with a simple traffic accident in the snow. How one person's refusal to accept responsibility had spiraled into months of harassment, legal battles, and finally criminal charges. The neighborhood held a block party that summer, the first one in years. Tom told me that Patricia had used to veto any proposals for neighborhood events, claiming they were too expensive or too much trouble. Without her blocking everything, the community started coming together. I stood in the street with my neighbors, eating burgers and drinking beer, watching kids play in the cul-de-sac. This was what a neighborhood was supposed to be. People who lived near each other, who looked out for each other, who did not live in fear of arbitrary rules and vindictive enforcement. Someone asked me to tell the story of Patricia and the mailbox, and I did, condensing months of stress into an entertaining 10-minute story. People laughed and shook their heads in disbelief. It felt good to laugh about it, to have enough distance from the events that they were becoming a funny story rather than a traumatic memory. Tom raised his beer. "To Vincent, for standing up to the HOA tyrant and making this neighborhood a better place." Everyone cheered, and I felt a strange sense of pride. I had not set out to be any kind of hero. I had just refused to be bullied, refused to accept blame for something I did not do. But in standing up for myself, I had apparently given others the courage to stand up too. Later that evening, after most people had gone home, I stood in my driveway looking at my mailbox. It was just a mailbox, a simple metal box on a wooden post, but it represented something bigger. It was the line I had drawn, the point where I said no more. I thought about Patricia, living in her apartment across town, probably still convinced that she had been right all along. Part of me felt sorry for her. She had spent years dedicating herself to what she saw as maintaining standards, only to end up arrested and divorced, her reputation in ruins. But mostly I felt grateful. Grateful that the justice system had worked, that the police had taken my complaints seriously, that the HOA board had voted to remove her. Grateful for neighbors like Tom who had supported me. Grateful that I had documented everything, installed cameras, kept records. The whole ordeal had taught me important lessons about standing up for yourself, about not backing down when you are in the right, about the importance of community. It had also taught me to be careful about HOAs and to pay attention to who was making decisions that affected my life. The Willow Creek HOA was different now, better. Board meetings were well attended and transparent. Decisions were made by consensus rather than by decree. Rules were enforced reasonably and fairly. The change had not happened overnight, but it had happened. As I walked back into my house that night, I glanced one more time at my mailbox, standing straight and strong exactly 22 inches from the curb. Tomorrow I would check my mail like normal, like millions of Americans do every day, a simple routine act that had somehow become the catalyst for everything that followed. The house was quiet and peaceful. No more midnight visits from angry ex-HOA presidents. No more violation notices taped to my door. No more lawsuits or court dates or police reports. Just peace, quiet, and the simple pleasure of living in my own home without fear. I poured myself a glass of whiskey and sat on my couch, thinking about how a single moment, Patricia's car hitting my mailbox on a snowy January morning, had changed so many lives. Mine, certainly, but also the other residents who had been living under her reign. Tom and Maria and Gary and countless others, who could now live without constant anxiety about HOA violations. The $8,000 Patricia owed me in restitution came in monthly payments, automatically deducted from her paycheck as part of her probation. Every month, that payment reminded me that justice had been served, that standing up for myself had been worth it. Years would pass, and the story of Patricia and the mailbox would become neighborhood legend, told to new residents as a cautionary tale about HOA overreach. Some details would get exaggerated over time, the way stories do. But the core truth would remain. One woman's refusal to accept responsibility for hitting a mailbox had exposed years of abuse and harassment, and one man's refusal to back down had helped change an entire community for the better. I finished my whiskey and went to bed, sleeping peacefully in my own home, secure in the knowledge that my mailbox would still be there in the morning, undamaged and exactly where it belonged.